Hello and welcome to day 11 part 2. We did part 1 in the last video. We are on to part 2 today. Let's dive right in. Let's do it. Let's just go. Okay. Part 2. As soon as people start to arrive, you realize your mistake. People don't just care about adjacent seats. They care about the first seat they can see in each of those 8 directions. That's great. Instead of considering just the 8 immediately adjacent seats, consider the first seat in each of those 8 directions. For example, the empty seat below would see 8 occupied seats. So here would see 8 occupied seats in all of those different directions. The leftmost empty seat below would only see 1 empty seat. Okay, so the first seat they can see in each of those 8 directions. Okay, so so the periods are where there is no seat, but the L is where there's an empty seat, and they only care about this first seat that they can see. So it doesn't matter whether or not they're on an aisle, for example, right? They actually do care about whether there's somebody across the aisle from them. That's essentially what that means. The leftmost empty seat below would only see 1 empty seat, but cannot see any of the occupied seats. Okay, the empty seat below would see no occupied seats. Right, because there's nothing in the same row or column. Okay. People seem to be more tolerant than you expected. It now takes 5 or more visible occupied seats for an occupied seat to become empty rather than 4 or more. Okay, so we need to change the rules slightly. So the major one is so the major one is this one, right? This is the rule that changed. Looks like this one has not changed. If a seat is occupied with the pound sign and 4 or more, and that's going to change to 5. And the adjacency is slightly different. We are no longer counting the periods. We have to find whether or not the first seat that it can quote unquote see, the closest seat in that row or column is in fact empty or occupied, whether or not there's a gap, whether or not there's an empty space there. Okay, so let's dive in. Okay, let's switch over here. Okay, so we're going to take some of our functions right here, and we're going to just copy these below, and we're going to rename them, and we're just going to modify them. So we've got part 2 adjacents, and this is where we're going to modify the rule for part 2 and what the adjacency looks like. And we'll say process part 2 seats, and I think we can actually just copy this in here and paste that there, and those rules should apply the same. So let's double check. Okay, so this one is going to change to a 5, right? Greater than or equal to 5. That's the only thing I think that should change here in this process part 2 seats. It's this one that's going to be really tricky. It's the part 2 adjacents, right? So we've got, let's say that we've got an index that will start with 1. And we'll throw this into a while loop while 0 is less than or equal to row plus the index times x, right? Because now we're going across the row, and then we'll do the column. And we want to make sure that this is less than the length of the grid, right? We're going down the rows, and 0 is less than or equal to the column, and we'll actually have essentially this same. So we'll have something very similar here in which we look at the grid and we want the we want the first row. This will be Y. And this is column. 0 is less than or equal to 0. I mean, that's true. 0 is less than or equal to the column plus the index times y, which is less than the length of the very first row. Okay, so now that we've got that, now we can iterate through all of those different indices, right? So our index is going to be plus equal 1, but we won't do that until after we do any processing here. So we have, we're gonna look at the grid, and let's call this chair, right? Or seat, maybe seat would be better. Seat. So our seat here is going to be grid row plus I times our X value. And similarly, we're going to have our column plus our I value times X, right? Same thing as up here. And this should be index, not I. Okay. Seat. And then if seat does not equal a period, then we're going to append to our adjacents the seat character, right? And we want to break our while loop. Oh, dot append. There we go. Okay, so if our seat doesn't equal the empty space, right? It's an empty space that's the period. Then we will continue, right? If it does equal an empty space, then we continue on to the next index so that it can look across the row, and then otherwise it will just append that particular character to our adjacents, which we then count later. So I think this actually is more simple than what I was expecting in terms of a solution. But there you go. Here's the slight adjustment. So we also need to clear this out because that is no longer a relevant rule. Okay, I think this is good to go. So let's test this out. Okay. Oh, of course. Process part 2 seats. So we ran the same function, so we got the same answer. That makes sense, right? Okay, so now we've got our different rules. This is part 2. Let's actually before we put this in as an answer, let's do the right thing and let's test this out on our sample code here. The correct response should be 26, 46. Three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is not promising. Not promising at all. There we go. Okay. how many seats end up occupied, right? And here's what this should look like. We end up with see, this is correct right here, except for this one, that character right there. And over here, it's every other. Now we just have too many that are actually filled right here. Okay, so what did I do wrong? Greater than or equal to 5. I'm pretty sure that one is correct. Okay, so we've got a different error, which is good, right? So the issue here was I had processed part 2 seats and I was still getting the part 1 adjacents. I just forgot to change the name in the function, and then here we're getting an index error, which is interesting because this here, row index, right? This is our index is 1, and we have row -1, 0, 1 for x and y. We've got our adjacents, row plus index times x is less than the length of the grid, and 0 is less than or equal to column plus index times y. Okay, let's see what this gives us here. Oh, figured it out. And it was yet another dumb mistake. This should be y, right? Because this is our column, y is our column value, and we were multiplying by the x value, which was the rows. So if the rows don't equal the columns, we could potentially get an error. 26 is the correct answer, which is what we were looking for. So after failing to rename my functions, we end up with, and we rename the functions and we fix the x into a y, we actually end up with the correct input there. Man, I'm really glad that we tested this with the input data, otherwise that would have been difficult. Let's go back here. I think I can actually just Control Z and then rerun this. Oh, this is going to print out my output, isn't it? That's fine. That's fine. Yeah. Okay. 2176. And our first answer was 2412. So fewer seats, which kind of makes sense since we now are able to see further, essentially, on those spots that have empty rows next to them. Okay, so let's input this and let's see if we, in fact, got the right answer. 2176. Come on. Let's go. There we go. All right. Well, that's it for this video. Thank you very much. Actually, let's just clean up the code just a little bit. I know. I said that was the end. Let's clean up the code a little bit. I do want to remove this print statement because I don't like it. I just want to output both of the answers for part 1 and part 2. This is similar. I'm sure there's a more more compound way, a simpler way to do this particular lookup, but I actually quite like it. Okay. All right. So that's actually it. So with all that being said, thank you very much. We are going to we'll stop here. If you like the video, make sure that you destroy that like button, hit subscribe, and if you feel like it, share the video, obviously. Hopefully this was helpful. I hope that you enjoyed it, that you got something out of it. Good luck on the future advents of code. I'm sitting here recording this on December 17th, and today's code was a challenge for me. So I'm looking forward to making that video, and hopefully that'll be a good one. So with all that being said, thank you very much. See you in the next video.